Hello chaps, Paul Curran here. I hope you're well, and all the listeners too, of course. Today's theme is the best of British. I'll explain more shortly, but begin by reading a sonnet that I wrote a couple of years ago called Try MPH. I know the car I'd most love to own. Well-read, early 70s TR6, that beautiful British-built roadster mix, boldly bearing the boxed badge of renown, great jewel in Triumph's commercial crown. 2.5 litre, manual, straight six, mint restored, flying new like a phoenix, to be roared, roof down, roared round my hometown. Not for the dropping into overdrive, instrumentation alive on the dash, nor for nearby gone auto heritage, more for the pace and the raw expressive chase and catching of oneself off guard, flash, much unfussed by life's high, rising mileage. Now, the reason I began with that is not just because yesterday, during a conversation at a barbecue, the third barbecue of the weekend, I should point out, was I encouraged to complete the restoration of a Triumph Spitfire that I have. It's because I spent some time last week in the city and in the countryside. The experience that I had in the city I'll come to a little later on. Suffice to say, it was at the Coventry Transport Museum. A most wonderful and enlightening afternoon spent wandering around the galleries there, which house everything from bicycles that predate the penny farthing right up to the most modern cars that really were built never to see road use. But more of that later on. Triumph, of course, coming from Coventry. I say I was in the city and the countryside. I'd like to thank Lagarde and Ruth for the cream tea that I enjoyed with them and with my girlfriend Victoria. Their wonderful, their lovely home near Broadway in Gloucestershire. The finest cream tea, surely, east of Devon, and a wonderful afternoon we had. That's prompted me to look up this next poem that I'm going to read, which is a very well-known poem, often referred to as Miss Joan Hunter Dunn, but it's correctly titled A Subaltern's Love Song, and was written in 1941 by Sir John Betjeman. A little bit about Betjeman first of all. I was aware that Betjeman had removed the second N from the end of his name at the time of the outbreak of the Second World War, his family believing that it made his name appear less German. What I wasn't aware of until I did a little bit of research was that his forebears during the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War had added that second N to avoid any incident in Holland, which is where they originated. Anyway, we know him as Betjeman with one N at the end of his name, and he failed to get a degree from Oxford. I think the system was slightly different in those days, and more subjects were perhaps had to be assessed, and I believe it might have been the mathematics part of the internal exams that he failed in 1 year. Anyway, he was able to resit, and then later on he submitted a paper in Welsh, I believe. His tutor at Magdalen College, Oxford, was C.S. Lewis, whom he didn't get on particularly well with. I think they never really saw eye to eye. And he rubbed shoulders with Auden. He became friendly with Patrick Kavanagh, a favourite poet of mine, and he married well. His father had been a a silversmith dealing in high-end um, Dutch products, very popular in the late Victorian times, and Betjeman himself had many interests that he was able to develop later in life, as well as poetry, of course. He had a keen interest in architecture, is responsible in many ways for the restoration or the preservation of St Pancras Station. The city of Bath owes a great deal to Betjeman for his opposition to a motorway that I think had been planned to cross the city. The Shell guides, with more and more people using motoring as a recreation, he was responsible for the Shell guides that appeared in the 30s for Cornwall and Devon, and he had a love as well of railways. I read that there was that in fact he was there at the unveiling of a train that was named the Sir John Betjeman. It's subsequently, I think, been renamed. Peter, perhaps you'll know if that's a common thing to do or not. Certainly with ships, it's not seen to be such a good move to rename a vessel. Anyway, Betjeman's poetry is much loved and was really quite accessible to everyone, which I think he was able to exploit because he became known on television and radio, and he was also he fronted documentaries. Metroland was one. One of his most famous lines, of course, is the "Come friendly bombs to Slough," which his daughter Candida Lysa Green apologised to the people of Slough for in 2006, the centenary of John Betjeman's birth. He was born in 2006 and lived to the age of 77. Sorry, I beg your pardon. He was born in 1906 and lived to the age of 77. Anyway, a subaltern's love song. A subaltern is a rank just below that of a captain in the British Army, of course. And I think the rest of the poem is quite straightforward. One senses that this was quite an affluent environment. They speak of the golf club, and it's a wonderful depiction of an England that isn't entirely vanished, and it's easier to imagine with the weather being as it has been than perhaps it would be if we were reading this in November. This is Subaltern's Love Song, written in 1941 by Sir John Betjeman, who described himself in Who's Who as a poet and hack, which I think is quite charming. Miss J. Hunter Dunn, Miss J. Hunter Dunn, furnished and burnished by Aldershot sun. What strenuous singles we played after tea, we in the tournament, you against me. Love 30, love 40, oh weakness of joy, the speed of a swallow, the grace of a boy. With carefulest carelessness, gaily you won. I am weak for your loveliness, Joan Hunter Dunn. Miss Joan Hunter Dunn, Miss Joan Hunter Dunn, how mad I am, sad I am, glad that you won. The warm-handled racket is back in its press, but my shock-headed victor, she loves me no less. Her father's euonymus shines as we walk, and swing past the summer-house buried in talk, and cool the veranda that welcomes us in, to the 6 o'clock news and a lime juice and gin. The scent of the conifers, sound of the bath, the view from my bedroom of moss-dappled path, as I struggle with double-end evening tie, for we dance at the golf club, my Victor and I. On the floor of the bedroom lie blazer and shorts, and the cream-coloured walls are betrophied with sports, and westering, questioning settles the sun on your low-leaded window, Miss Joan Hunter Dunn. The hillman is waiting, the lights in the hall, the pictures of Egypt are bright on the wall. My sweet, I am standing beside the oak stair, and there on the landings the light on your hair. By roads not adopted, by woodlanded ways, she drove to the club in the late summer haze, into 9 o'clock Camberley, heavy with bells, and mushroomy, pinewoody, evergreen smells. Miss Joan Hunter Dunn, Miss Joan Hunter Dunn, I can hear from the car park the dance has begun. Oh, Surrey twilight, importunate band, oh, strongly adorable tennis girl's hand. Around us are Rovers and Austins afar, above us the intimate roof of the car. And here on my right is the girl of my choice, with the tilt of her nose and the chime of her voice, and the scent of her wrap and the words never said, and the ominous, ominous dancing ahead. We sat in the car park till 20 to 1, and now I'm engaged to Miss Joan Hunter Dunn. Charming depiction of that tennis match in 1941, and it transpires that Miss Joan Hunter Dunn was somebody that John Betjeman had encountered when he'd been married for some years, 5-6 years or so, and he was so taken by this girl that he bumped into in London that he wrote this 44-line poem and had it published, and then later thought to apologise to her by inviting her around for dinner. Joan Hunter Dunn lived until quite recently, 2008, I believe, and she said in the 60s that it was a very clear and close depiction of what had occurred. Anyway, today, the first day of Wimbledon, so a bit of tennis there, and as I said, the best of British. Well, from the sunny countryside into the Transport Museum in Coventry, which was free to enter and really is well worth a visit. All sorts of vehicles there, and as well the depiction of Coventry struggling after the German bombing campaign in 1940. And then there's the trade unions and so on, and all these vehicles that'll be familiar to listeners. But what I hadn't realised is that at the end of the permanent exhibition, there is a chance to look at 2 supersonic cars, Thrust 2 and Thrust SSC, SSC supersonic car, and that's the vehicle which had broken gone quicker in the Nevada desert than the speed of sound some years ago. Now, quite coincidentally, about 18 months back, I was driving home and I heard an interview that had been recorded some dozen or 15 years earlier with these 2 gentlemen, Richard Noble and Andy Green, who were responsible for the racing of Thrust SSC and the victory in the Nevada desert, the victory over the American team and their Spirit of America. So I felt compelled just to scribble down a few of the facts and figures, and I wrote a sonnet about it, which I'll leave you with now. And it was remarkably gratifying to find myself in a simulator of this incredible vehicle, and to realise that some of the things I'd written down weren't wholly inaccurate. And I do recommend to you all, if you haven't been around the Coventry Transport Museum, especially with the school holidays looming, that would certainly be something that I would put high on the list of things to do. Well worth a visit. This is the sonnet that I wrote, and it's called Suck, Squeeze, Bang, Blow. Brave a tale of courage, madness and trust you're unlikely to hear this era. Richard Noble, Andy Green, GB's Thrust, Supersonic Barrier, Nevada. Mach 1, full lock at over 650, nearer to 720 miles per hour. Mad, aerodynamically shifty. American's spirit, no Mayflower. Into funds fast spent as time to prepare. Early attempt had floundered to standstill. Doing it because the mountain is there. Some say they hear the boom o'er the sand still. Sonic pioneers, in all honesty. Old style gents with great British modesty.